Hello, I am Sean of the Lore Hunter, and this is the first episode of my Sekiro Shadows Die Twice First Impression series. That's right, Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is finally out. I'm playing it, and what this series is area by area first impressions. Just my thoughts. It's not going to cover everything that happens in the area. It's going to be my thoughts about the narrative, my experiences, stories, things worth noting, some speculation. It's just going to be where I'm at with the game after each area as I'm playing through as sort of a snapshot. And what I intended for this series to be is sort of a companion as you play along to get someone else's impressions as they're playing. So, preferably as you're playing along, like for the first time, but I'm doing it area by area. That way you can listen to what you've played and you can not listen to what you haven't got around to yet. And so this first episode is going to cover the prologue and the opening area and a little bit of the Ashina Outskirts, which is the first formal area, and up to a point where you get a key item from an old lady. So that if that doesn't sound familiar, then feel free to tune out when you get there. I'll make sure to say what part I'm talking about now. But yeah, so it won't be the whole Ashina Outskirts, just the first section. So let's start with that. Let's start with that prologue. And also, just as a disclaimer, if you follow my videos, this is going to be much more informal. This is sort of off the cuff, as makes more sense for a series like this than a more scripted video like you see me produce typically. So we start the game with an extended version of the story trailer that we saw, featuring a few new details, like the samurai general who got owned by Isen Ashina. Yeah, General Tamura, I believe. And so we've seen this before. It's great. It gets you right into stuff, sets up the world. And then we get to the scene where the owl finds the wolf. That's all pretty much the same. And watching the part where the wolf is older now, it's and it sort of makes more sense from where it seems to be that they're going with it. But the fact that you just see the wolf looking through this crack in a door saying, "Here's your master," it just feels a little weird. Like why you don't see anyone else, maybe they're holding it back. But the fact that, as we'll soon learn, the wolf also has a memory loss, they're really keeping certain things from me that make me very curious about, if that's for a purpose. I'm sure that his memory loss overall is for a purpose, but I'm just with that opening with him, just the owl starting to crack open the door like, "Here's your master." Not showing that was interesting to me, just having it be ambiguous, this beam of light sort of coming through the door. Also, I don't know why they're sitting in a dark room, but, besides the point. So, next we have the Umbrella Lady. We see that scene we saw from I think it's the original trailer or the TGS trailer. Umbrella Lady standing there. It's the opening of the game. It is looking down at the wolf, as some people speculated. He's sitting down in a hole, and is that Emma? It kind of seems like Emma to me, even though you don't see her yet. I think that's who it is, and we'll get more into her. But this is just my thought, was if that's Emma or not. And so then we get into the wolf has lost everything, his master, who he's supposed to be protecting, and so he doesn't know anything that happened. As we're going through this first part, when we first meet Kuro, the divine heir, his name's Kuro, I guess, we find out that there's some memory loss, and as we do know from pre-release information, I will be talking about some pre-release stuff just because that's my experience going into the game. We know that eventually we see the Hirata Estates, which takes place 3 years prior. The events that happened in reality, outside of whatever is playing through in the game, that was 3 years ago. And Kuro mentions that night, and I'm wondering if the Harada States is that night. And so that means they maybe haven't seen each other in 3 years. So I'm curious to know, like, what has happened in the intervening time. And, I'm wondering if the game is going to flesh that out. If, it seems like it's an intentional mystery. So, and another thing to note just about the timeline of events here is the wolf starts with the dragon's heritage mark, which is skipping a little ahead, but if you played through what I said we'd cover, you have heard some of this stuff. The wolf starts with the dragon's heritage mark, which is interesting to me because in the tutorial, as I died, you don't resurrect, but my understanding of the dragon's heritage is that's what causes the resurrection. So I don't know if it's just a concession towards introducing different parts of the game to you one at a time and still explains why you come back to life, or if there's a story or lore reason why you don't yet have the ability to resurrect. But you definitely seem to have the dragon's heritage already when you're in the hole at the beginning of the game. And another interesting thing about Kura's discussion with the wolf is when he gives him a Kasabi Maru. The item description for Kasabi Maru mentioned the sword that Kuro gives him is that they talk about mercy and that the blade can offer mercy. And I wonder what mercy the wolf might end up offering in a game where we know he's basically going around stabbing people a lot with it. So he's not offering too much mercy. So I'm wondering if we have a big decision at some point in the game or at points where there is the option for mercy. And so we get these opening cutscenes. There's just a whole round of story setup, which makes sense for a game with a more direct story. And I really like it. I'm listening to it in Japanese with the English subtitles, and I found myself very invested in the world, and I felt very immersed in the fantastical version of Sengoku era Japan that that FromSoft is evoking with all of this. So let's talk a bit about the Ashina Castle sort of as a tutorial. And I think it's really good. I like how they introduce the elements discreetly. Like first you start off without a sword, so they're sort of emphasizing like the first thing is like sneaking around and getting around in traversal, because we know that's something that FromSoft is very interested in this game, is freedom of movement and traversal. And then so they bring that in, and then they get you right into the combat after you speak with Kuro. And I found that just from this opening, I already can see, so deflecting an attack isn't hard. Deflecting an attack is fine. Off of one guy, I was breezing right through those first few guys with the deflection. When you start to get outnumbered or you get flustered, I noticed that's when my I want to call it my Dark Souls reflex starts getting, and you start dodging a lot, and I'm like forgetting what the game is trying to have me do. And I noticed with this first mid-boss, dude, I can't remember his name, General what's his face, that as I was having to, if I flubbed a deflect, I got flustered, and then all of a sudden I'm sprinting around, freaking out, jumping all over the place. So it is interesting. Landing the one deflect isn't too bad. It's pretty easy, but landing them consecutively and keeping that pacing, it's this real thing where you're either on pace or you're not on pace. And when you're not on pace and you're getting hit, things go downhill really fast. And it's like, it's like a fight ends up like you're great or you die. And there is some scraping by, definitely. And you can get some real, you can have like a really small sliver of health, but still keep fighting as long as you deflect or block the attacks. And sort of speaking about that is one thing that I noticed from this opening that I'm hoping, I sort of just work myself into, is it's hard for me, and I think this is a valid sort of critique of the UI, is that it is hard for me to keep balanced my own posture and the enemy's posture, and to see their health and my own health. These things are not very close to each other on the screen, but they're all extremely important for my understanding. And I think maybe it's just because it's different at first that it's confusing. But I definitely noticed myself being able to, like, I could focus on the enemy's posture, or I could take a look at their health, or I could take a look at my health, and my posture would break. And I wouldn't notice for a second until I got the cue from my character, just sort of like sitting there, that my posture was broken. And that's something where, when you're watching someone play and you're not doing the controls and you're not having to put in the inputs, it's not too bad. But once you're actually asked to sort of balance those things with the speed of combat, it becomes kind of difficult. So I think that might be something I work into, but just something I noticed so far is it's kind of hard for me to keep track of all the stuff I kind of need to keep track of during combat. So you go around, you do the read stuff, and you get to Genishiro, and boy, he ate me alive. I did not beat him. I know you can beat him. I've seen the cutscene that happens when you do. It's all fun, but yeah, he ate me. And part of it is because, you get through the opening and you're like, okay, I think I'm getting it. And then you see your first, like, perilous attack with a little kanji symbol floating above. And I was just, that threw me off. And like I said before, it's like, you're sailing along or you're crashing. And as soon as you started missing in these special attacks, I was crashing. So overall, like, my thoughts about this is I like this opening, sort of comparing. I like sort of thinking about tutorials and how they show you the game. And on the one hand, with FromSoft, you have Bloodborne that throws you into the deep end without much setup. A focus on getting the story to you. It's very atmospheric with the werewolf and then into Central Yharnam, but it's not much of a tutorial. Whereas, like, Dark Souls has much more of a tutorial area. But it feels like, in some ways, like the Undead Asylum is great. But it also feels a little bit gamey because you're cut off, and it's important for the story, but it's not getting you out into the larger world in the same way where I think in Sekiro, even though it's sort of its own it's not part of the grander world, and they are really walking you through it. It does also operate very logically on a narrative level, and it all sort of worked for me. So I think, Sekiro manages to have the really great hook that I feel like Bloodborne has, getting you right into the world, but it also has a very manageable tutorial to get you into the game mechanics. So then, of course, your arm gets cut off, and we find ourselves at the dilapidated temple, and so we're using the sculptor's prosthetic arm. That makes sense. He's missing his left arm, you're missing your left arm. It all works out very well. And the sculptor's great, and I'm already so curious about his story. He just has so many good, like, little lines. I don't know if they're meant to be comedic, but I just find them kind of funny. Like, one thing about him is his Buddha statues are all wrathful, and that's because it's something of, what he's done in his past. He mentions he has some sort of karmic debt. What did he do? He I think seems like it's hinting that he was once a shinobi, as sort of hinted at with the shinobi prosthetic, and he turned away from that path, and now he sculpts Buddhas, and I really enjoyed that, and I'm curious to see where his story goes. And so then we have Harame the Undying. I think Harame the Undying, and he's great. He has my favorite line so far, where he's just like, "Damn, still alive," in Japanese, of course. But we're gonna through subtitles, but you feel it, and he's very interesting because he's Undying, which we know a little about from pre-release stuff that the Senpo Temple is really interested in. And it's also interesting that Undying he also calls Infested. and we saw some stuff. I won't say much about it for those who haven't looked at the coverage as much, but I'm interested about the infested aspect, why it's called that also. And being undying, I'm also curious, like, is a minor pre-release spoiler. If you want to skip ahead a few seconds, but well, keep it short. Will we kill him with Fushigiri? Because that should be able to do it. And so I'll move on from that, but I'm curious to see where that goes. And then a little later on, we also get Emma here, and she mentions your face, which I talked about with. She's the one who sort of says, like, that indicates dragon's heritage. It's a symptom, it's a cause of having the dragon's heritage. And it's interesting that, like, the wolf has memory loss, but he seems to know nothing about it. And I'm wondering maybe if it happened at that night. Like, it didn't happen before 3 years prior, potentially. So I'm just curious the timeline of events, when he got that mark, when he got the dragon's heritage, and what circumstances that happened under, because it seems to have happened before the start of the narrative. So then we peek into the Ashina Outskirts, and man, what a title card. What a goddamn gorgeous vista. The place is so dense with stuff to discover and look at. Like, you got this rooster. And you got this memorial merchant, whatever. And you have this basement full of money that you steal from a sweet old lady who gives you a mystical bell. Which feels rude, but, I guess that's how it goes. Even having watched so many hours of pre-release footage, I found stuff I hadn't seen in any of them. There's just stuff everywhere. That you can fly through the level with your grappling hook, which is interesting. But if you don't know what's around, you could be missing out on a bunch of stuff that, especially early game, you're strapped for cash. You want to collect everything. And yeah, it's really densely packed with stuff. But back to the old lady for a second. She wants to give the young master his bell, and she wants to see her son. She thinks you're her son. Her son is bleeding out like 10 feet away. Like, I know that house is set up weird, like you basically have to grapple to it. But they're so close. Dark Souls, they did this in Dark Souls 2 with the blacksmith and his daughter. Like, I know they set that up so that it's sort of set up to go to Harada Estates. But I just found it he's so close to her. Like, I want to just carry him over to her. Like, I can do so much with that prosthetic. Can I lift a dude? And then, so from here, and where I'm going to end this first episode, is that I really like how they open up the option to go to the Harada Estates now. And I think it's a really good way of signaling that, and then they will signal it with a mid-boss also as sort of a wall of something that I know from pre-release you get in the Harada Estates. They're sort of signaling that you're not going to just play through the levels. It's not linear at all. And that you're going to want to explore, and when you have the option to go to multiple areas, there's going to be tools and resources that you're going to want to check out. And it's setting that signal really strongly, and it's really exciting for me because I like that idea of sort of a Metroidvania, like a Metroidvania, but not at the same time. It's not like you literally can't go through without this ability so far. It's just, this would really benefit you. And I like the idea of, it would be really good to have this tool and to explore this area to get this stuff to be better equipped to then move to loop around and then move forward. But if you didn't want to do that, there's nothing stopping you. It's just your own ability and basically how difficult you want things to be for yourself. And so I'm really into that, and I'm really excited. And the next episode will be going into that area related to the bell. So that's what's coming up next. And so stay tuned for that. I in my actual playthrough, I've peeked into it a little bit, and I'm very excited to keep playing and very excited to keep talking about this. And definitely in the comments, like, share your own experiences about this opening the area, your impressions, because this would be fun as the discussion. I like talking and sharing my stuff, but I'd love to read your own experiences as well. And that would be fun going through that. We can sort of have a dialogue back and forth. So if you like this stuff, like, subscribe, ding, all that stupid shit. So you can keep up with it and, just otherwise check in. And yeah, thanks for watching.